What we as leaders, as thought leaders, as people leaders do is we make the environment around us safe for change, for experimenting, for failure, ultimately.
Hi everyone, I'm Richard Parfitt, the Marketing Director at iVentive, and I am delighted to be joined today by Laura Medina Escolano. Laura is the head of the Centre of Excellence for Learning and Development at DEKRA, the German professional inspection and expert certification company. Born in Spain and then growing up in Germany, Laura's career spans various industries and roles. She first joined DEKRA as head of IT strategy, portfolio and planning in 2021 before taking on her current role in January 2024. Laura led a breakout session on the topic of skills-based talent strategies at iVentive's Learning Futures Stuttgart last year, and will lead a breakout again at Stuttgart this September. We're going to talk more about skills and learning culture as we go into the questions. But firstly, Laura, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Richard, for having me. It's really a pleasure.
It's great to have you. And we were talking just before we started recording about your path into learning and development. And I wonder if you could just share something about your journey into professional L&D from where you started, because it's a really interesting and perhaps unconventional route in.
So I started, the first touch point I had with learning and with development, personal development, was many, many years ago. When I playing basketball at second Bundesliga in Germany, I also coached little girls. So I started gaining the passion for seeing little girls grow up and eventually become adults, but still continue developing. And now you follow them up on LinkedIn and see what's got out of them. And that's just very fulfilling for me. So in any role that I had afterwards, no matter if it was when I made a jump from my business studies to gastronomy, then rather also going after that into process consulting, management consulting, and then ultimately the IT planning perspective. And then, of course, now COE learning and development. Personal development as such, either as my personal development or supporting others in growing, has been somehow the connecting point. So this is where I'm very, very happy that I got these different perspectives, these different backgrounds, and also the chance to learn from that myself.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to embody the kind of things that you're that you want your learners to be taking on. And we often mistake learning, I suppose, as something that is done to you rather than something that you do yourself. And we talk a lot about this idea of a learning culture, which I think comes through really strongly in what you were in your story and your journey into L&D. So as our sort of starting point, then, if we talk about that idea of learning culture, if we think about a truly thriving learning culture, what for you are the behaviors and mindsets that distinguish that from a perhaps very good but more traditional training-based approach?
Yeah. So what I would like to really focus my answer on is really the mindset, because that's what then again afterwards is going to deliver or derive actions and behaviors from. And the biggest change there in the mindset has to be, or must be, in the world that we live in today, at a very basic and profound level for each learner or for each person somewhere on the globe. So we do have a big change between reactive and proactive. So in the past, organizations, personal people could sit down and wait and see what happens and then react upon that, and then adapt their skill set as they went. This is not possible today anymore. So the world is changing way too far. So we need to change that perspective and mindset to what is actually potentially going to happen. What do I need to happen? What do I want? And what do I need to prepare for? And that's potentially the biggest mindset change that we will see. Now, for organizations, this means, though, that learning and development of our people is changing from a nice to have employee benefit that we tell people about when we want to hire, to a must have strategic to do, right? So it has to become part of strategic, second nature of strategic habit. And then that's what's then going to lead into actions and habits. And that habit action that you will feel most is going to be curiosity, because that's the trigger, right? So that's what triggers you to proactively say, what's coming? Which technology is coming up next? What am I interested in? Where do I want to go? And that curiosity at the end has to become my go-to first thought in daily life. And so curiosity becomes more of a performance behavior, less than a personality trait. And that's, I feel, very, very exciting.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And that curiosity piece has become such a key word for people as they think about this idea of learning culture. But it strikes me that a lot of organizations talk about this and say we need a curious learning culture, we need a proactive learning culture. It's not just a training kind of one and done
Mhm.
approach where we will teach you the thing and then you will know the thing and you will go and you will do the thing. um so I just wonder what practical steps organizations can actually take, because it's so easy to say this but then actually just continue. When push comes to shove, you make a training program and you deliver the training program, and that's
Yeah.
all that happens. So what are the practical steps that organizations need to take so that learning and curiosity becomes that continuous daily habit,
Yeah.
um, rather than something we just say on the recruitment page?
Yeah. Richard, the key to this answer, to this question for me is I personally, in my everyday life, I try to take the wording training program and training intervention out of the narrative because that puts people on that old thought of this is a one-off, we're trying to solve this, or not even, we're trying to do this because people think it's important now. So looking at more from the user perspective, or in IT talk user perspective, and learning learners perspective, we need to make things easy. So it has to, curiosity is something that is inside of you, and therefore learning has to be linked to that thing that you do every day. You open up Teams or Zoom or Slack and you perform certain tasks. Well, ideally, if you're, for example, trying to make a better sales pitch, you'll have something integrated in that flow that tells you what to look at in that situation that you're in right now. And it's a great vision to have, but it's also very difficult to implement because you have to find new ways to get there. So you have to get curious yourself to find new ways of embedding this in your daily life. And the great thing is that AI is there to help. So there's many things that if you look outside of the box, you can do to get in there. But it can be as easy as preparing thought ideas that you then somehow are feeding in, or templates, or just simple companions that go with your people. Or if you look at a more pragmatic approach, if you know that you have a skill gap that you have to fill, that is of course also in daily life, you can tell your people, hey, set aside 15 minutes a week or half an hour a week to actively look at that thing and make it part of your daily life. So you know that every Friday at 1, you're going to sit down and do your 15 minutes of French learning because you know that's a market you're going to expand into, right? So make it part of your daily habit and make it be there. And what's, from my perspective, also most important is leaders. So leadership has at their hand to make things second nature. We are the ones that shape how the day to day works and how it looks like. So my micro behavior is going to directly influence the learning behavior of my people. So if every time I have a to fix with them, I ask them, hey, what did you learn last week? And even if they tell me, hey, I learned how to crochet, well, that's something that make you learn something, right? So just talking about it makes people more curious, makes people feel that it's good to try out, that it's good to experiment, and that sparks the curiosity.
And can I just a quick follow up on that leaders point? Are we talking leaders at the executive level, middle managers, all of the above? Are we talking about people who are maybe in a position of being social leaders within the group of employees, but not necessarily in a management
Yeah,
position?
that's an awesome question because we need everybody, right? So it's really talking from C-level to team leader. And even if you don't have a leadership position in your company or in your setup, you can be a kids coach in your local community. You can be selling fruit at the market on your free time. You are leading people through situations in that situation, and that means that you're influencing them. And just you tend to mirror what you see. So by role modeling, no matter in which situation you are, you're going to influence people, and that's where you become a leader.
So you've talked there about the things that help you create this learning culture and the things
Yeah.
that drive it along. But in your experience, what's the biggest blocker? What gets in the way of fostering a kind of growth mindset and learning culture across different teams and across a business culture? And what can you do to overcome those blockers?
Yeah. Richard, the thing is that we're all human. Um, and that's the beauty of it, but it's also potentially the biggest challenge. I don't want to say blocker. Um, the thing is that we're trying to change the mindset, and the mindset will always be bound to values, to own attitudes, to experiences, to things that I'm very safe with, right? That's our fallback. So when I try to change the mindset, I'm trying to change the fallback option for people. And that's ultimately very, very scary. So what we're asking from people is to double check and challenge what they knew was right or safe in the past. So we're really talking very, very deep parts of the self that are bound with trust, with fear, but then somehow with safety. So that's why I don't want to call it a blocker. It's just purely the essence of change, that we need to make things safe in a way that they're perceived as safe. Of course, nobody is in real danger, but their unconsciousness is there and feels everything as a threat that is not like I knew it was yesterday. So knowing that, the conversation we just had about leaders becomes even more important, because what we as leaders, as thought leaders, as people leaders do is we make the environment around us safe for change, for experimenting, for failure, ultimately. And there's many things that we can do to get there. We can admit our own failures, our mistakes, and say, hey, I did this last week. This didn't work. This is what I learned. I'll do that next time. If you do that, your people will be safe, or feel safe in the situation to actually do that as well. So we're building up trust, and trust is the best antidote to fear. So at the end, that's the direction I feel we have to look for if you're looking at challenges.
Yeah, and again, just another quick follow up on that fear of failure. As you started answering that question, I wondered if you were going to mention the idea of failure, um, because we talk a lot in learning about people need to feel safe to try new things and fail at them in order to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm always really interested because when I think of it from a consumer or customer perspective, I think like I don't want my lawyer or my doctor or these people learning by failing when they're
Yeah.
doing things with me. So um, is there a tension that you have to overcome there? Am I oversimplifying that, or are there practical things that you can do to combine, I suppose, delivery excellence with a safe environment for failure as well?
Yeah. So the thing is, what you're describing is potentially the highest level of it. So when you go to
Mhm.
your lawyer and your lawyer fails, and then you fail, and then he has learned something, well, that's only a little bit satisfying, right, for
Yeah.
everybody. However, the idea of learning and development and of personal development is that your lawyer might have failed before he got to the situation that he's defending you in a setup. So that's somehow ultimately for me the role of learning and development through a person's career or personal also life, is that your responsibility grows with time. So the size of the mistakes and the relevance and the consequence of the failure grows with time. So the idea has to be for everyone listening, make as much mistakes as you can when the consequence is little. When you're at university, when you're growing up, obviously you'll have safety rails there. You'll have your parents, ideally, you'll have a community supporting you. That's when you have to make the mistakes. Obviously, then later you have to gain a level of expertise that helps you not make the big mistake when the consequence is very high. So that's the magic, I want to say, from life perspective, but from organizational perspective, finding environments that are safe for failure. And those can be learning initiatives like a closed cohort conversation where you're testing out things, or experiments on a digital twin, or a VR glasses. So that's where you test and fail, and then you get into the real world and you don't fail anymore, ideally.
Yeah. And that's where the learning team, I guess, is such an
Yes,
important part of the process because they're the ones who can create those environments for that
exactly.
to happen. Now, thank you for indulging me on that one. And So I mentioned in my introduction, you've spoken at our events before about the skills question as well, and we're seeing so many roles and skills evolving incredibly rapidly that a skill that might have been
Mhm.
vital a few years ago becomes not necessarily redundant, but less important or accessed in a completely different way
Mhm.
now. And so I just wonder what changes in the way that you design and deliver learning have you found most effective in meeting people where they are, especially when you have a multi-generational workforce that perhaps learns in different ways and has different expectations when it comes to that rapid evolution of skills.
Yeah. So I would like to divide that in two pieces. So on the one hand, delivery wise, it's a bit obvious. So you try to make courses shorter, you try to make them more interactive, to combine video, text, and image. I mean, you're a marketing expert, you know what I'm talking about. So you're trying to make things bite-sized, adapt to this slower attention capability that our target groups tend to have. So you try to just go in there and also include things in the flow of work so that it doesn't feel like I have to stop to do something, to start something new, like learning in this case. That's somehow the obvious. What I feel is more important is to look a step before delivery and before design of a learning intervention, which is how you get there. How do you even get to the decision of what you're going to focus on learning wise? Because that's where the strategic background comes in. So if instead of just looking at, okay, this is what our people are asking for, so I'm organizing 5 learning plans or 5 training programs, I look into where does my organization want to be in 5 years. And then based on that strategic development, I ask myself, am I able to do that with what I have today in terms of skills, in terms of capabilities? And if not, what do I have to do to close that gap? And that then links back ultimately to the people that have a career aspiration, that have a development aspiration, and that talks to them personally, because then you're creating career paths, you're creating ways of growing, of self fulfilling, and you're giving it a purpose. And specifically, when you talk about Gen Z and millennials that like us, like are on the workforce right now, we want a purpose. We want to know why we're doing things. So that connects this very, very originary need for purpose inside our people with what is the value of the company. And that meets the interest then in the middle. So for me, really the big question is at the beginning. What do I want to reach? And then based on that, I define what I learn. And then it gets interesting.
And there's a really interesting combination of skills that you need in the learning team to make that happen, because there's that storytelling piece of giving it purpose and telling the story to your audience in a way that makes sense to them, but also you need really good data to make that to know what the story is and know what the skills are that the business is going to need in 5 years.
Yes.
That's a multi-million-dollar question in a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
So that must put a lot of strain on you, not strain, but that's a big challenge for you as a learning organization.
It is a huge challenge, but a very beautiful one because you're combining the storytelling with the data, and it's two contrasts completely against each other because skills can be a very, very beautiful data point. It's very easy to measure skills. You can look at what people do and how good they do it. The challenge is how do I measure that and how do I compare it to what I need? So that's the beauty of it. That change is coming now. This is a behavior or a mindset that we didn't have before in the industry. So we're finding our way around the challenge, and that's great because we're making mistakes as well. So we're learning a lot.
It's a really interesting perspective, and it's great to see how enthusiastic you are about it as well, and how up for the challenge you very clearly are. So really grateful to you for sharing that. And I would just want to finish with a final question, which we're asking all of our guests on this series at the moment, which is for your controversial learning and development opinion. So is there one L&D belief or practice that you think the industry needs to seriously rethink or maybe abandon completely, even if that's a bit of a controversial take, and you can have some fun with this one?
The first thing I thought, and I'm still fully behind it, is that learning or personal development is not a cost center. It's not a cost block. We still have that in the mindset of almost all, I don't want to put all on the bench, but of many C-levels that learning HR is somehow a cost. And it's only looked at as a cost. And that's difficult because if you need it to be strategic, You should rather look at it as a lever or as an enabler for business strategy. And I'm not saying spend all the money on it. I'm just saying change the perspective on what's the value that it brings you and how can you connect that to the business goals. So honestly, Henry Ford is supposed to have said that the only thing worse than training your people and them leaving is not training them and they staying. And I still see a lot of truth in that. So if we want to stay with the world and keep up, we somehow need to make learning and development non-negotiable.
Thank you again for giving us your time, for sharing your ideas, and we very much look forward to seeing you later this year in Stuttgart.
Thank you so much, Richard, for having me. It was great.